She survived abuse, built everything from nothing, then got a text for her 30th while sister got Japan. A text message. That is what she got for her 30th birthday. No call, no visit, no card, no dinner, no nothing. Just a text. And while she was sitting with that, her parents were booking a $10,000 trip to Japan for her little sister. And here is the part that is going to stay with you. This was not some random disappointment. This was the latest chapter in a lifetime of being treated like she did not quite belong in her own family. She was 8 years old when her parents divorced and she went to live with her mother. Think about that age for a second. 8 years old is still believing that the adults around you will keep you safe. 8 years old is still trusting that the world is basically good because nobody has proven otherwise yet. What followed was not a difficult childhood. It was a dangerous one. She was neglected, left hungry, and sexually abused by her mother's partner. The hunger was not the absence of snacks. It was the kind of hunger that a child should never have to know, the kind that makes the stomach cramp and the mind go quiet and desperate. When she went to the police for help, they dismissed her. Called her attention-seeking. Imagine being that little girl, sitting across from adults in uniforms who were supposed to represent safety and protection, and being told that the worst thing that ever happened to you was made up. That your pain was performance. And then her mother, the one person in the world who was supposed to protect her above everything else, chose him. She chose him over her own daughter. And just like that, this little girl was pushed out of her own home. She eventually ended up living with her father, but let's not pretend that was some kind of rescue. It was not. She never felt like she was truly part of his new family. She was there, physically present, eating at the same table, sleeping under the same roof, but there is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being in a house full of people who do not really want you there, and she knew that feeling intimately. She was a teenager carrying wounds that most adults could not survive, wounds that had never been treated, never acknowledged, never held with any kind of care. And instead of getting support, she was basically left to figure it out. She drank. She used. She found whatever she could to cope, because when you are in that much pain and nobody is handing you tools, you build your own, even when those tools are also destroying you. She ended up in juvenile detention for a while. And still, no real help came. No meaningful support. No intervention that felt like love. Not once did an adult in her life sit down beside her and say, "What happened to you was not your fault, and I am going to help you get through it." At 14, she was already working if she wanted anything at all. While her parents traveled, she stayed with her grandparents. When she turned 18, she got a chocolate and a bracelet. At 19, she left for another country with 500 euros in her pocket, and there were periods where she had no food and slept on floors. Not a rough patch. Not a tight month. Floors. No food. The kind of survival that leaves a mark on a person not because it broke them, but because it required them to reach so deep inside themselves that they found something nobody can ever take away. And she built herself back up from that, completely on her own, through sheer will and determination that most people will never have to find inside themselves. She did not have a family to call. She did not have a safety net that would catch her if she fell too far. She had herself, and she made that be enough. Now she is 31. She has a daughter. She is back in school. She and her partner bring in around 3,000 euros a month, and they manage, but it is tight. No car. Strict budgeting. Limited food choices. The kind of budgeting where you know exactly what is in the account at all times, where every purchase gets weighed before it is made, where the difference between a good week and a bad week is sometimes a single unexpected expense. A medical copay. A school supply list. A pair of shoes that wore through faster than expected. Where a broken appliance is not an inconvenience but a genuine crisis that requires moving money around and going without something else. One unexpected bill can throw the whole month into chaos. That is the reality she is living inside of right now, in this moment, as an adult woman who never had a safety net, never had a cushion, never had someone to call when things got hard. She has never once been able to pick up the phone and say, "Dad, I am struggling, can you help?" and trust that the answer would be yes without conditions or silence or shame. She has always been on her own in the most fundamental sense, not just financially but emotionally, in the way that matters most when life becomes too heavy to carry alone. And she is still standing. Still showing up every day. Still building something real for her daughter, deliberately and carefully constructing the kind of stable, loving childhood she herself never got to have, making sure her daughter knows what it feels like to be seen and wanted and chosen. And her parents? They are upper middle class. House with a garden. 2 cars. Multiple holidays a year. Concerts. A comfortable life that they have built and enjoy, which is completely fine. Nobody is saying they are not allowed to have good things. But here is where it gets painful. When her grandmother passed away and the estate was settled, somewhere in the range of €100,000 was distributed among the family. She received 1,001. Not a percentage that reflected her relationship to her grandmother. Not a portion that said, "We see how hard your life has been and we want to do something meaningful." €1,000 in a distribution involving 100 times that amount, handed over with the energy of something being checked off a list rather than something being given with thought or warmth or acknowledgement of everything she had survived. And even that felt less like generosity and more like a gesture to keep her from making noise, a small payment to maintain the appearance of inclusion without actually practicing it, because that is how she has always been treated. Not as a daughter, but as a problem to be managed from a distance, kept calm enough not to cause a scene but never truly brought into the circle. Then comes the Japan trip. Her younger sister just turned 18, and their parents are taking the whole family on a $10,000 journey to Japan for the occasion. That is not even their only holiday this year. The sister gets concert tickets, she gets what she needs, she gets what she wants, she gets to grow up in a family where she is clearly loved and prioritized and celebrated, where her milestones are treated like events worth marking, worth spending on, worth showing up for. And none of that is her sister's fault. She genuinely loves her sister and does not blame her for any of this. Their relationship is good and she would never want her sister to go through what she went through. She means that. There is no resentment aimed at her sister, only love, and that matters. It says something important about who she is. But the contrast is impossible to sit with quietly. It just is. There is something almost surreal about holding 2 realities at the same time. One where you are the daughter who got a text for her 30th birthday and €1,000 from an inheritance worth 100 times that. And another where your sister is 18 years old and the whole family is flying to Japan to celebrate her, because she matters in ways that have always been made visible, tangible, booked and paid for and photographed. This is not about jealousy. This is not about wanting her sister to have less. This is about a woman looking at the evidence of her entire life laid out in front of her and realizing, with total clarity, that she has always mattered less. The $10,000 trip is just the most recent and most visible proof of something she has already known in her bones for years, something she has probably spent decades trying to argue herself out of feeling, telling herself she was being too sensitive, reading too much into things, that maybe next time would be different. What makes this even harder is that her father regularly talks about stress and money problems and health concerns. He brings it up. He makes it part of the conversation, the weight of it all, how hard things are, how tight things feel. He lets his own anxiety about finances become visible and present and shared. And then turns around and books international trips and concerts and experiences without a second thought. Without a moment of wondering whether his daughter, who is managing a tight budget and raising a child and going back to school, might benefit from even a fraction of that. That contradiction is not just frustrating. It is insulting. Because it tells her that the scarcity is selective. That the stress he talks about is real enough to use as a reason not to show up for her, but not real enough to actually limit what he does for the rest of his family. The resources exist. He has access to them. The choice to exclude her from any meaningful share of them is not accidental, not an oversight. It is intentional, even if nobody in that family would ever say it out loud. Even if they have convinced themselves that this is all perfectly normal and no one is doing anything wrong. She found out about the Japan trip not because her parents told her, which they did not. She found out because her sister mentioned it, casually, the way you mention something to someone you assume already knows. If her sister had not said anything, she probably would have seen the photos on social media eventually, sunny images from a beautiful country, her family smiling in places she was never invited to see. That detail alone says so much. They are not hiding it because they feel guilty. They just do not think to include her in the conversation, because in their mental picture of the family, she is somewhere on the edges. An afterthought. Someone who is technically related but not really accounted for. A friend told her, it is what it is their money. And yes, technically that is true. They can spend their money however they want. But that framing completely sidesteps what is actually happening here. This is not a stranger spending money in a way she disagrees with. This is a father who watched his daughter survive abuse, neglect, poverty, and instability, who watched her build a life from absolutely nothing, who knows she is currently struggling, and who chose to spend $10,000 celebrating his other daughter without even thinking to acknowledge that the first one might need something. Anything. A phone call. A visit. A dinner. Something that says you matter to me too. That friend's advice, while well-meaning, is the kind of advice that keeps people in situations that are slowly destroying them. It is the kind of thing people say when they are uncomfortable with the full weight of what they are being told, when acknowledging the real injustice of a situation feels like too much, so they retreat to something technically true but emotionally useless. It is what it is. It is their money. As if the law is the only lens through which love and family and obligation can be understood. As if the absence of a legal requirement to care for someone means caring for them was never the expectation. Because the question is not whether her parents are legally obligated to spend money on her. The question is whether staying close to people who have consistently communicated that she is less than is actually good for her. Whether the access she gives them to her life, and more importantly to her daughter's life, is something they have earned or something they simply assume is owed to them because of biology. Whether she is holding on to the idea of a family that has never actually existed for her, and paying a real emotional price every single day to maintain that illusion. She is sitting with the idea of distancing herself or going no contact. And she is wondering if that makes her wrong, or unreasonable, or ungrateful. She is probably also carrying some version of the guilt that gets planted in children who were failed by their parents, the backwards, unfair guilt of being the one who might walk away, as if loyalty to people who never fully claimed you is somehow a virtue. Let me be absolutely clear about this. She is not the asshole. She is not even close to being the asshole. She is a woman who has absorbed a lifetime of low-level rejection from the people who were supposed to love her most, and she has reached a point where she is honest enough to name what she sees. That takes courage. Most people spend their entire lives rearranging the story so they never have to look directly at it. The fact that she still loves her sister, still does not want her to suffer, still approaches this with nuance and fairness, tells you everything about her character. She is not bitter in the way that breaks people. She is hurting in the way that happens when you have spent 30 years hoping things will be different and finally have to face the possibility that they will not. She deserves to protect her peace. She deserves to build boundaries around her emotional well-being. She deserves to be around people who see her, all of her, the struggle and the survival and the strength, and who show up for her in ways that are real. If her father and stepmother cannot be those people, which 3 decades of evidence suggests they cannot, then she owes them nothing. Not her presence, not her access, not her daughter's time, not her emotional energy. The 30th birthday text was not a small thing. It was a summary. It was the whole relationship condensed into one tiny, careless moment. And she felt it that way because she was right to. I accused my brother of stealing $40 from my home and he hung up on me mid-sentence. $40 went missing from a tip jar in his own house, and nobody will admit to touching it. Now his brother is not speaking to him, and somehow he is the one being made to feel like the villain. Let's just pause and sit with that for a second, because the social gymnastics happening here are genuinely impressive. Here is the setup. He keeps a tip jar near his front door for delivery orders. It is a simple system, nothing fancy, just a clear jar sitting on the entryway table where he can grab cash quickly when the doorbell rings. He keeps a notebook next to it where he logs the balance every single week, because he is the kind of person who actually tracks these things rather than letting it become a vague pile of mystery money. Before his brother's family arrived to stay for a few days, the jar had $120 in it. He had logged it. It was written down in plain ink. He did not order any food during their visit because they were cooking together at home, the way families sometimes do when they are trying to make a visit feel warm and intentional. After they left, he sat down and counted the jar the way he does every week, and $40 was gone. Nothing written in the notebook. No record of a delivery. No note. His wife confirmed she had not touched it, and she said it without hesitation, the way you say something when the answer is genuinely simple. And nobody else had been inside the house during that stretch of days. Nobody. So he called his brother. He did not send an accusatory text. He did not loop in other family members first. He picked up the phone and called, which is actually the more mature and direct path, and he asked calmly if he knew anything about the missing money. You can almost imagine the tone he was going for, careful and even, trying to leave room for an innocent explanation because he probably did not want to believe anything bad about his own brother. The brother said no and claimed he did not even know the jar existed, which is a reasonable thing to say if true. His wife said the same when asked. He then raised the possibility that maybe one of their kids had gotten into it, because children are curious and impulsive and completely capable of swiping something shiny without understanding what they are doing or why it matters. That is a perfectly reasonable and even generous thing to consider, because it hands the adults an out. It says maybe this was not intentional. And that is when his brother exploded. He said the kids were not even tall enough to reach the jar, accused him of calling him a thief, and hung up the phone. No attempt to problem solve. No moment of shared confusion. Just heat and then silence. Okay, so let us think through this carefully, because there are really only a few possible explanations for what happened to that $40. Either the money was miscounted before the visit, either his wife is mistaken about not using it, either one of the kids somehow got to it in a way the parents did not notice, or either an adult in the visiting family took it. Those are the options. There is no mystery fifth party. There was nobody else in that house. The money did not evaporate and it did not walk out on its own. Someone touched it, or the original count was wrong. That is the entire universe of possibilities here. Now, the brother's defense about the kids not being tall enough is interesting, but it is not airtight. Children are creative and determined when they want something, especially something that looks interesting sitting on a table near a door. Chairs exist. Stools exist. Stepping on things exists. Older siblings exist. The idea that a child cannot reach something is not the same as proving a child did not reach something. But fine. Let's say the kids genuinely could not have done it. That does not actually clear the situation, it just narrows it further. I want to be honest here. It is entirely possible this money was taken, and it is equally possible there is an innocent explanation that nobody has figured out yet. Miscounts happen. People forget they grabbed cash in a hurry and meant to log it later and simply did not. Notebooks miss entries. None of that is dramatic, it is just human and slightly embarrassing and completely forgivable. The problem is not that he asked the question. The problem would be if he treated the question as a conviction before hearing anyone out. And here is the key thing. He did not call his brother a thief. He asked if anyone knew about the missing money. He raised the possibility that one of the kids might have gotten into it, which is actually a softer and kinder way to open that conversation than pointing a finger directly at an adult. He said that if everyone was telling the truth, he could not think of who else could have taken it. That is not an accusation. That is a logical observation spoken out loud by someone who is genuinely confused and trying to make sense of something that does not add up. There is a meaningful difference between saying you stole from me and saying I am confused about where this money went and you are the only variable I can identify. One of those sentences closes a door. The other one leaves it open. The brother's explosive reaction is worth examining carefully, because it is really the center of this whole story. People get defensive for different reasons, and those reasons are not always what they appear to be from the outside. Some people blow up because they are guilty and cornered, and the anger is a way of going on offense before they can be put on defense. Some people blow up because they are genuinely innocent and feel deeply disrespected by even the faint shadow of an implication. They take the question as an insult to their character and they react from that wounded place rather than from reason. Both of those things happen constantly in real life and they can look completely identical from the outside. A slammed phone is a slammed phone whether it comes from shame or from pride. The anger alone, as loud and clear as it was, does not tell us who took the money. What it does tell us is that the brother is not interested in actually resolving this. A person who genuinely did not take the money and who understood that their host was simply confused and trying to work through a frustrating situation would probably respond very differently. They might say something like, "Wow, that is so strange. I am sorry that happened to you. I genuinely do not know what could have caused that. I hope you figure it out." They might even offer to help think through it, because that is what people do when they feel secure in their own innocence. Instead, the brother made this into a personal attack the moment children were mentioned, escalated rapidly without pausing to consider what his brother was actually asking or feeling, and disconnected the call entirely. That is a choice. A deliberate one. Whether it comes from guilt or from pride or from some old pattern between these two brothers that has nothing to do with $40, it is a choice that shut down any possibility of a real and honest conversation happening that day. He is not the asshole for asking the question. You are allowed to notice that money disappeared from your own home during the only period when anyone outside your household was present, and you are allowed to bring that up directly with the people who were there. Being a gracious host does not mean pretending you did not notice things that you clearly noticed. It does not mean absorbing a $40 loss in silence and swallowing the discomfort to avoid one awkward phone call. He handled it as calmly and as fairly as the situation reasonably allowed. He gave the conversation every possible chance to go well, and his brother chose to blow it up rather than engage honestly and with any generosity. The relationship damage here is real, and that is genuinely sad. $40 is not a lot of money in the grand scheme of a lifetime relationship between two brothers. But the principle underneath that specific amount is significant. If someone in that family did take the money, the complete absence of accountability is the actual problem worth grieving. If nobody took it and there is some innocent explanation that has simply not surfaced yet, then the brother's reaction was wildly disproportionate and that becomes its own separate problem that needs to be addressed. Either way, the brother owes him a calmer conversation and very likely an apology for hanging up the phone like that. He should hold his ground on this one. Not aggressively, not with new accusations, but firmly and without apology for having raised it in the first place. He noticed something was off, he asked about it the right way, and he deserves a real response instead of a tantrum. The fact that it was only $40 almost makes the brother's explosion more suspicious in hindsight, not less. If you are completely innocent and genuinely confident in that innocence, a missing $40 from someone else's tip jar is a strange thing to completely lose your composure over. Innocent people tend to find that kind of question annoying at worst. They do not tend to hang up. Not the asshole. Not even a little bit. If you've been watching this whole time, drop a comment telling me which story hit you harder. I genuinely want to know. And if you haven't liked and subscribed yet, now is a good time.